Good morning, everybody. My name is Prad Sekar. I'm the CEO and co-founder of cb2insights. Maybe I'll stand up here, it's easier. cb2insights is a publicly traded company on the CSE. We trade under ticker symbol CBII. We're pretty new. We just started trading March of 2019. Presents a very unique opportunity within the cannabis sector today. cb2insights is a data asset. Effectively, what we're building within the medical cannabis industry, again, specializing in the medicinal side of the business, is the foundational elements for a future pharmaceutical industry as it starts to merge into cannabis in the near term. The company's been operating for about 5 years now. We'll be announcing our year-end financials towards the end of this month, but the company preliminarily will report about a $10.8 million revenue, with earnings from its operations being profitable, being reinvested back into the data analytics business. So with that, I'll get started. So the founders, Cash and myself, come from a healthcare background. We believe the future value of medical cannabis isn't the realm of what we're seeing today as the market speaks about medical cannabis as a global industry. Rather, we started to now see big tobacco, alcohol get into the space. We see the future of medical cannabis being a phytopharmaceutical-based industry, an industry that's already accompanied with processes and structures by many of the large big pharma players. This chart here represents some of the top names in big pharma today that hold US patents in active cannabinoids that are available within their own shelves today but have not yet been taken to commercialization. We've already seen groups like GW Pharma starting to come through with FDA-approved Epidiolex, and this is what we define as a future of the medical cannabis industry, namely known as a hallmark drug, a product that has been approved through the FDA, that has clearly validated safety and efficacy claims data trials, that has been provided by payers and insurance as reimbursement claims, prescribed by clinicians and available at pharmacies. Over the years, and we see this in the next 3 to 5 years happening, we're going to start to see a much greater intersection between big pharma and the medical side of the industry that we see today. Now, what does that mean? That effectively means that you're going to need to have the foundational element of data in order to support this future industry. Every new drug that's brought to market has within it years of phase 1 to phase 4 clinical trial data to outline safety, efficacy, dosing, titration, effectiveness, and this information is used to educate clinicians, payers, insurance companies, regulatory bodies like the FDA in the US, Health Canada here in Canada, and effectively this information then goes on to providing the guidance behind how a drug gets adopted from an R&D perspective, but also commercialized. This does not exist in medical cannabis today. Medical cannabis has years of anecdotal data behind it, crowdsourced patient data that typically leads to what today is being used to define what product for what type of condition set. As we start to see a maturity of the market move into a pharmaceutical-based industry, the industry is going to have to start to generate this type of information in order for the industry to start taking it from a regulatory perspective for approvals, through to insurance, through to patients, through to doctors. A multi-billion-dollar industry today that is lacking on that foundational element of data. So just last year in December, the FDA released what they determined as real-world evidence, new guidelines. It's brand new, and it started to become a very big, attractive area within big pharma today. In fact, most big pharma now have dedicated departments for real-world evidence. Real-world evidence is defined as any data that is outside of traditional clinical trials. Today, the largest source of real-world data comes from electronic health records, basically doctors' offices. FDA has basically allowed big pharma now to take real-world evidence to either substitute, complement clinical trial data to allow drug manufacturers to bring products to market sooner, or to be able to outline efficacy and claims to be able to support applications for new drug development. So, as we talk about research within the cannabis industry, getting this data is going to be super critical to the future of medical cannabis. And without that kind of baseline today, you're going to have to spend another 3 to 4 years redesigning that type of data in order to get to that commercialization stage. The challenge, however, that exists today, even though EHR data, clinical data, can be substituted for clinical trial data, is that the majority of clinics operating in the medical cannabis sector today that are processing patients for certifications or prescriptions or recommendations are, number one, highly fragmented, and number two, operating without any real standard protocols, which means that the data we collect from these clinics is inevitably very difficult to be able to process to the same level of scrutiny that will be required in order to be utilized as what the FDA defines as real-world evidence. And this presents a really big opportunity for the industry, but more importantly for cb2insights. So this is what cb2insights is doing. We're building a data asset with very clear three defined divisions. Our first division is clinical. We own and operate today one of the largest networks of specialized medical centers in the US. We have about 32 locations spread across 14 states. We've evaluated over the last 3 years over 300,000 patients, and we are seeing over 85,000 patients for a multitude of indications who are being treated with cannabis for those indications. Each of these locations is staffed with doctors, nurses, clinical team members that basically take a patient from day one of their exploration of trying to see if cannabis would fit for their current portfolio, all the way through to years of assessing them after they've been treating themselves with medical cannabis. Our second division is technology. We have developed our own proprietary electronic health record system. Our technology system allows us to not only standardize how these clinics operate, but is the basis upon which how we collect data through these longitudinal and observational clinical trials. So as the FDA defines real-world data coming from electronic health record, cb2insights is now the largest aggregator of process-based, protocol-based real-world evidence in medical cannabis. So today, where clinical trials are lacking significantly in providing that kind of value, and anecdotal data cannot be taken for face value, clinical trial data through cb2insights is able to now provide information on safety, efficacy, effectiveness, dosing, titration, and commercialization. Now, as this data continues to advance, we've started to invest heavily into our third division, which is analytics. We have started to take some of the leaders in machine learning and AI, bring them into our team, and help us design a strategy around how we take this data, use machine learning, use AI to start to generate insights, relationships. How can this data be used by big pharma? How can this data be used by regulators, insurance companies, in order to understand how each of them currently see drugs that they are approving for markets today, and how will that eventually be seen as GW Pharma, Merck, Sanofi, Bristol Myers, all the big names in big pharma start to look to commercialize what they currently have as patents within their portfolio. So as we start to see the growth of our business, 2018, 2019, 2020, we've been focusing on what we call a consolidation strategy. Because of the highly fragmented nature of the United States, it allows us to be able to go in with our infrastructure today of 32 locations and a well-designed clinical operational team and processes to go in and acquire other medical clinics within the US today that are operating as a solo practice or operating as very small groups within a certain market. This allows us to do two things. Number one, for shareholders, it shows a short-term growth in revenue. It shows how we continue to grow revenues as every acquisition has immediate revenue recognition and immediate profitability recognition. Our clinic, and I'll show this as I go along, but the second thing it does for us is it helps us build a bigger and bigger patient database. And as the US today represents the largest network of mature medical cannabis patients, cb2insights will remain the largest aggregator of medical cannabis real-world evidence. So part of the challenge that exists today within the medical cannabis, within the pharma industry, is that most real-world evidence is limited to just clinical data. For some of you that may not have seen this, Flatiron Health, which was a real-world evidence aggregator in oncology, was purchased by Roche last year for $2 billion. The value per patient was $1,000 per patient. And what Flatiron had was a network of 265 cancer community centers where they were treating over 2 million active patients and gathering data from the treatment of those patients. Very similar to what cb2insights is looking to do within the medical cannabis sector. However, the challenge is most of that data stops at the point of prescription. Our technology is designed not only to capture the patient life cycle in a clinic, but also capture the patient life cycle once they leave the clinic. So we have applications that are based on collecting how patients are using their medication, feedback cycles that go back to their caregivers, feedback cycles that go back to the patients. All this enables the robustness of the data sets that we are collecting to take it beyond just anecdotal data that's being collected today and very much in the framework of where big pharma goes. We've attracted a lot of attention as we've continued to build out this data asset. Obviously, medical cannabis today is still at a very early maturity state, but like I said, we've started to now see the conversations around how big pharma starts to participate in this industry. And the inflection point for our business in the future will really be at the point at which the proper structures and protocols are required now around data, and the ability for us to use the data we have today in the market, unfortunately, will not stand up. So what can shareholders look forward to within our company? As we continue to expedite and execute our rollout strategy and acquisition strategy, we're going to continue to add more top-line revenue and bottom-line profits. The business today, from a clinical perspective, does close to about a 15 to 20% positive EBITDA, and we're looking to grow that up to 30% with more economy of scale. With every clinical acquisition, we continue to gain more economy of scale, and we look forward to hitting that within the next few years. The business, as it continues to grow with the clinical roll-up strategy, like I said, increases patient base, which takes us to the next inflection point. The blue line represents data monetization. The challenge is today in medical cannabis, there are no parallels drawn to how data gets monetized. However, we can take parallels from other healthcare verticals where we start to see, like in the realm of Flatiron, $1,000 per patient. And so the reason is to see where that value comes over time is why we are looking at forecasting this not this year, but in the coming years as we start to explore where big pharma, where regulators, where insurance companies, where healthcare providers start to see the value of real-world evidence from medical cannabis in their daily lives. Now, as I mentioned, as the business continues to grow, we will grow not just as a clinical roll-up operator, but also grow as a data company. And that's really the value of what cb2insights is. We're a healthcare data tech play focused on the medical cannabis sector, being able to generate in the short term a profitable return for shareholders based on clinical operations, but by reinvesting that back into a future analytics business, start to position ourselves for a future much larger valuation as the company grows into a much larger provider pool of buyers. The company so far has raised close to about $16 million since its inception. Our last raise was oversubscribed at $5.74 million. Our lead investor was Merida Capital out of New York, one of the largest VCs in the medical cannabis sector. Today, I think they're just currently on their third fund of $200 million. And Merida Capital saw the strategy and synergy with cb2insights because a large part of their valuation in the future, again, is in the value of data. We all understand that cannabis is lacking true data. And as we start to look at the various verticals from retail to point of sale to medical, there is no one really focused on the medical data set today. And we understand that the size of the buyers coming into it will be very large. Some of our recent news that we released since we went public, 2 weeks ago, we announced two acquisitions of 2 clinical groups that expanded our reach from 12 states to 14 states, therefore showing shareholders that this is a market that is applicable for roll-up. Undervaluing these businesses at less than 1 times revenue gives shareholders an immediate recognition on the public markets and allows us to also grow with a much less cash and stock-based conservative position. As the business continues to grow with this, we start to show how data gets demonstrated. So a few weeks ago, we announced a partnership with a company called Premier Health. Premier Health runs an EMR system in Canada on the West Coast called Juno. And Juno is utilized by over 5,000 physicians today. These are regular GPs. What cb2insights will be doing with Juno, which is the first of its kind integration, is now integrating our machine learning algorithms into their EMR, so that now all those 5,000 healthcare providers will have access to real-world information at the point of care when they're sitting in front of their patient to help them understand how to qualify, how to discuss risks, contraindications, dosing, titration, all the type of information that we all know today is significantly lacking from a clinical perspective. And so this is where cb2insights' future is going. It's about collecting data at scale, at a profitable scale, within the US, and investing in how those analytics can help to drive a future global medical cannabis market. And as we prove out our model with Premier, we will be able to start generating what those financial metrics are on those performances and be able to take this not just within the Canadian context, but within a North American context, a European context, a South American context, because this problem is not only localized to Canada, it's happening all over the world. So in summary, cb2insights is playing within a very niche sector of the market today. Today, the market, although is focused on a recreational and medical split, the future medicinal market will be worth much more than what it is worth today. However, the inputs to that future market is where we believe the free option for investors is in, where today they can see their value returned as we consolidate more clinics and as we continue to grow the business in a consolidation strategy. But we commit to show how this data gets monetized and, like Flatiron did within the oncology sector, start to become a really valuable data asset within a future phytopharmaceutical industry. So with that, I'll pause, and I'd like to take any questions if there are. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, was there one? No, I don't think so. Thank you very much.